Chapter 733. Everyone stopped in unison and waited for Chu Luiyue. Along the way, they were almost used to doing this. Chu Luiyue would take the lead to investigate whenever they encountered any situation. After confirming the specific problem, they would act according to Chu Luiyue's instructions. At first, some people weren't convinced. After all, Chu Luiyue's slender figure and overly beautiful face really didn't look like someone who could do such things. But after Chu Luiyue led them to avoid a few attacks and saved even more people, such doubts gradually disappeared. All of them followed obediently. Lei Laosi followed as usual. Chu Luiyue glanced sideways and smiled at him. "Big brother Lei, you don't have to follow me every time. We're so close. Even if something really happens, I can handle it." Lei Laosi paused for a while before speaking in a low voice. "It's always good just in case. Her Highness is capable. But in this world, an accident that can be predicted isn't an accident anymore. Back then, Her Highness was only one step away from becoming a Stage 9 warrior. How valiant was she? What happened in the end? She was still framed by a traitor and died in a sea of fire. Back then, the 13th Yu sect was too trusting of Her Highness, so others took advantage of her. Now that it happened again, they definitely wouldn't let such a thing happen a second time." Chu Luiyue looked at the stubborn Lei Laosi and felt warmth in her heart. "Thank you, big brother Lei." Lei Laosi coughed uncomfortably. He looked up unintentionally and vaguely saw a few people. They looked like a few young people, and the one at the front looked a little familiar. "Who is that?" Chu Luiyue followed his line of sight and looked over. Then she smiled. "Isn't this Purple Shao Sword Sect's Song Qingyan?" There were 3 people beside him, and Yang Qin was one of them. At this time, Song Qingyan had just cut off the tree roots that wrapped around him and was about to help the others. When he heard the commotion, he immediately turned around vigilantly. "Who is it?" He first saw Lei Laosi in front and was secretly shocked. This unfamiliar man is extremely powerful. He gripped the sword in his hand tightly. Lei Laosi had already recognized Song Qingyan, but he still had to pretend that he didn't. He sized up Song Qingyan and sneered. "You don't have to do this. If I want to attack you, none of you can stop me." Song Qingyan frowned and was about to speak when he saw Chu Luiyue walking up from behind him. "Big brother Lei, I know these people. Don't scare them," Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Lei Laosi scoffed softly and crossed his arms, having no intention of helping at all. He had no interest in saving the people of the Purple Shao Sword sect. "Chu Luiyue? Why is it you?" Song Qingyan was still wary of Lei Laosi, and his gaze toward Chu Luiyue was filled with doubt. She looked fine, as if she wasn't injured at all. He had sacrificed so many treasures and barely managed to hold on until now, but he still looked much worse than Chu Luiyue. There must be something wrong with her. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept across these people. Song Qingyan was still fine. Other than some bloodstains on his body, he was basically uninjured. After all, he was the young master of the Purple Shao Sword sect, and he would have many protective treasures on him. The others, on the other hand, were a little more miserable. However, Yang Qin seemed to be fine too. Chu Luiyue suddenly recalled that Song Qingyan seemed to be hugging Yang Qin in his arms just now. She smiled. "Young Master Song, don't worry. We were passing by here and came over after hearing the commotion. We didn't expect to meet you guys. We wanted to see if we could help, but it seems like we don't need to anymore." Song Qingyan sized up Chu Luiyue suspiciously and frowned. "Help us?" His words were filled with undisguised contempt. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Since he already said so, why should she stick her warm face to his cold butt? "It seems like young Master Song doesn't think highly of us, so we won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye." After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, she turned around and left decisively. Lei Laosi chuckled and immediately followed her. Her Highness's personality seemed to have changed a little compared to before. If it were in the past, Her Highness would at least talk more with Song Qingyan on account of the Purple Shao Sword sect. But now, she turned around and left without saying anything. Awesome. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Lei Laosi really left so decisively, Song Qingyan was stunned. What exactly does this mean? Looking at the two of them leaving, Song Qingyan frowned, and anger rose in his heart. A mere Chu Luiwei actually dared to throw such a look at me. My purple Shao Sword sect doesn't need anyone's help at all. Let alone Chu Luiwei. What a joke. Did she think that she could intimidate others just because she called an unknown powerful figure over? He retracted his gaze in disgust and pulled Yang Qin, who was closest to him, up before cutting off the tree roots on her body. Qin, you shouldn't be so weak. Is there something wrong with your body? Song Qingyan asked casually. Yang Qin's face tightened, and she instinctively moved her wrist back. As the surroundings were dark, Song Qingyan didn't see the change in her expression. Maybe I'm tired from the long journey? Also, I met a bottleneck in my cultivation recently, so… Song Qingyan didn't really suspect anything, so he believed her after hearing what she said. It's fine. With me around, I'll definitely protect you. Yang Qin looked at him gratefully and thanked him repeatedly. Song Qingyan was in a great mood from her admiring gaze, so he threw Chu Luiwei's matter to the back of his mind. Then he made a move again, planning to pull the remaining two people up. We have to get out of this damn place as soon as possible. Before he finished speaking, a cold wind suddenly came from the darkness. Swoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Several thick tree roots were thrown towards the few of them at the same time. Song Qingyan knew that this was bad and immediately pulled Yang Qin into his arms. Then he dodged backward. With his move, the remaining two people who hadn't been pulled out of the swamp were tightly entangled by the tree roots. Save the… The short cry for help came to an abrupt end. Crack! The sound of bones breaking could be heard. The tree roots actually wrapped around their necks and twisted violently. Their heads were tilted in a strange posture, and their eyeballs protruded. Not long after, they completely stopped breathing. Chu Luiwei turned around with a sharp gaze. She tapped her toes and immediately flew over. At the same time, she raised her wrist, and a ball of scarlet flames transformed into a fire whip, quickly wrapping around the tree roots. Dumpling! Chu Luiwei shouted. Dumpling's wings flapped, and a colorful stream of light flew out. It intertwined with the scarlet flames. The flames directly drilled into the tree roots and spread all the way. Ah! The boiling temperature caught Shangguan Wan off guard, and she screamed. A ball of flames flew over. Swoosh! It actually directly penetrated the barrier and pounced toward Shangguan Wan. Shangguan Wan subconsciously injected her force into the pure gold armor. However, not only was the pure gold armor not activated, but it also repelled all her power. A look of deep shock flashed across Shangguan Wan's eyes. The pure gold armor, and it even had an owner. Digression. Today is the last day of June. Those who have tickets, please don't forget to vote. The tickets will be voided tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 734. The shattered barrier instantly transformed into countless streams of light and condensed in front of Shangguan Wan again. At the same time, a black ripple rippled out from the rune in between Shangguan Wan's eyebrows. Quietly, it stuck to the enchantment. Buzz. A terrifying pressure spread out. Boom. The two forces collided together. That ball of flame was finally blocked outside. However, the barrier was also shaking violently, as though it would shatter at any time. Shangguan Wan's face was filled with fear. Just now, she truly felt the surging and terrifying power contained in that ball of flame. If that attack really landed on her body, she was afraid that… Shangguan Wan looked at the pure gold sacred armor on her body and paused for a moment. Then, as though she had gone crazy, she quickly took off the pure gold sacred armor. Her actions were very fast. There was a trace of deep fear in her anger. She didn't even care that her hair and clothes were messed up. Bang! Shangguan Wan threw the pure gold sacred armor on the ground. As though she was afraid of something, she took 2 steps back. However, her eyes were still staring at it. Her eyes were cold and ruthless with raging anger. It was as though she wanted to burn a hole in the pure gold sacred armor. How is this possible? How is this possible? Shang Guanwan muttered to herself. Her face was green and white. Her chest was heaving up and down violently as she panted heavily. She clenched her fists tightly. Her nails dug deep into her palms and blood dripped down. However, how could she care about that at this moment? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. It was as though her head was going to explode. The pure gold sacred armor used to belong to Shang Guanyu. After Shang Guanyu died, the pure gold sacred armor became an ownerless item. Logically speaking, under such circumstances, anyone could activate the pure gold sacred armor as long as they poured their force into it. However, just now, when Shang Guanwan wanted to do so, she was shocked to find that her force couldn't be poured into the pure gold sacred armor. Didn't this mean that the pure gold armor still had an owner? No, it can't be. She's already dead. How could it be? Shang Guanwan's lips trembled. She kept comforting herself, but her heart was still beating violently. Thinking about the situation just now, she couldn't calm down no matter how hard she tried, let alone convince herself. The pure gold armor lay quietly on the ground. It was exactly the same as when Shang Guanwan first took it out. There was nothing wrong with it. Shang Guanwan stared at him, her expression changing. No, Shang Guanyu was definitely dead back then. His physical body had perished, and his soul had dispersed. She had seen it with her own eyes. There was no way she was still alive. Thinking of this, Shang Guanwan took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Could it be because the last bit of origin power in her body hadn't fully recovered? She turned her head to take a look. The few tree roots that he had sent out earlier had all been burned. It wasn't easy for him to find the right opportunity to kill the 2 Purple Shao Sword sect disciples. However, before he could devour their strength, he had already... Shang Guanwan was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. This person definitely did it on purpose. And this ball of fire... She looked at the ball of fire coldly and resentfully. In the center of the red flame, there was a gorgeous colorful stream of light that was also dancing. It seemed to be monitoring and also provocation. You guessed right. This is indeed Chu Liuyue's power. That hoarse voice sounded again. Shang Guanwan's heart sank. She couldn't help but frown. But the power contained in it is clearly stronger than Chu Liyue. I'm not done yet. That voice lazily interrupted Shang Guanwan. Other than her, there's also the red-tailed red phoenix, which is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was about to break through at the beginning. What? Shang Guanwan widened her eyes in shock. This, you mean, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant has successfully broken through to become a red-tailed red phoenix, and Chu Liyue was able to move together with the red-tailed red phoenix. It was self-evident what it meant. This Chu Liyue's luck isn't ordinary. A divine beast like the red-tailed red phoenix is extremely arrogant. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't form a contract with a human, especially with a mere stage 5 warrior. That voice had a layer of coldness. It was obvious that it was also very surprised by this matter. You worked so hard, but in the end, it was all for someone else. These words were full of ridicule. Shang Guanwan was already in deep shock. Being ridiculed like this made her feel even worse. Her hatred for Chu Liyue also deepened. She had only jumped down to repair her Yuan Meridian. How long had it been? Yet, Chu Liyue had taken the initiative. Divine beast. That was a real divine beast. She hadn't even seen it before. In the blink of an eye, Chu Liyue had already formed a contract with it. Bitch. It's useless to say this now. Even if a divine beast's soul is destroyed, it won't recognize a second master. You don't have to think about this anymore. Besides, Chu Liyue has probably guessed what you're doing now. The most important thing now is to repair your Yuan Meridian and leave this place. Thank you for your guidance, senior. Shang Guanwan suppressed the resentment in her heart with great difficulty. However, deep in her heart, she was still brooding over this matter. The black patterns on the barriers suddenly scattered. Like a drop of ink dripping into water, the entire barrier was quickly dyed black. Shang Guanwan's figure was gradually covered by the barrier. She thought to herself, Chu Liyue must be with the people from the Purple Shao Sword sect now. Since that was the case, She could just find someone else to attack. She didn't believe that Chu Luiwei could really stop her. Shangguan Wan sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Unconsciously, she glanced at the pure gold armor lying quietly on the ground again. Uneasiness rose in her heart. When she was fully recovered, she must take the pure gold armor for herself. The black runes fluttered gently. An invisible ripple flew towards the ball of flame. Boom! The flame exploded. Even the roots of the tree were blasted away by the explosion. Chu Luiwei quickly retreated. Dumpling flapped her wings, and a hurricane suddenly appeared. All of the chaotic energy was blocked. After a series of explosions, the entire space finally quieted down. Chu Luiwei frowned. Someone was helping Shangguan Wan. Unfortunately, the other party acted too quickly. She couldn't see it clearly. The key was that this person was extremely powerful. Even Lei Laosi might not be the other party's match. When did Shangguan Wan have such a mysterious and powerful helper? A sobbing sound came from behind. Chu Luiwei turned around. Yang Qin was covering her face and crying in front of the two disciples who were already dead. She seemed to be very sorrowful. "It's all my fault. Senior brother, you shouldn't have saved me first." Song Qingyan was also upset because of the loss of these two disciples, but when he heard Yang Qin crying like that, his heart immediately ached. "How can I blame you? You were the closest to me back then. Who else should I save if not you?" Yang Qin sobbed as she looked at him pitifully and innocently with her red eyes. If Miss Chu had taken action earlier, perhaps it would have been different. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 735. Upon hearing that, Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows and turned around. "Miss Yang, what do you mean by that?" Yang Qing glanced at Chu Luiwei. Her heart skipped a beat when she met his dark jade-like eyes. She quickly looked away as if she was on fire. She took half a step back, as if she was frightened by Chu Luiwei's appearance. "Miss Chu, don't misunderstand. I was just saying it casually. I didn't mean anything else. These two senior brothers are extremely outstanding disciples of the Purple Shao Sword sect. It's a pity that they died like this. I'm blaming myself. If I had insisted on asking you for help just now, all of this might not have happened." When Chu Luiwei heard this, she looked nonchalant, and her lips curved up into a cold smile. He thought that Yang Qin would be more obedient after the previous incident. He didn't expect her to still be able to distort the truth and not distinguish right from wrong. However, Song Qingyan listened to him. He patted Yang Qin's shoulder gently and comforted her softly. "Qin, you can't be blamed for this. This matter has nothing to do with you at all. Don't blame yourself anymore, okay?" After saying that, he looked at Chu Luiwei. The gentle expression on his face instantly turned cold. His eyes and nose were no longer his eyes, and his eyes were no longer his nose. "Chu Luiwei, Qin's words are not without reason. Since you can get rid of those tree roots so easily, why didn't you take action until the two of them were hanged? I think you did it on purpose." Yang Qin had once unintentionally mentioned that she had unintentionally offended Chu Luiwei. Because the Purple Shao Sword sect and the Chongshu Pavilion had always disliked each other, Chu Luiwei had intentionally or unintentionally made things difficult for her several times. Recently, Chu Luiwei had become famous in Xiling City, and Song Qingyan couldn't stand it. Coupled with Yang Qin's nonsense, he was even more disgusted with Chu Luiwei. Therefore, at this moment, he directly pushed all the blame onto Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei was so angry that he laughed. "If I remember correctly, I was the one who offered to help at first, but I was rejected by you. Why is it my fault now? Young Master Song, don't tell me you've already forgotten what you said at the beginning?" Song Qingyan choked, and his face quickly turned red. At that time, he didn't put Chu Luiwei in his eyes at all, which was why he said that. Who knew that Chu Luiwei was actually so powerful? There were a total of 10 people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. 2 of them had already died, and now another 2 had died. Other than him and Yang Qin, the rest of them were still missing. There was no trace of them. Even if Song Qingyan had a noble status, He couldn't help but feel a little flustered. He was the one who had brought people there, and all of them were disciples with the most potential in the Purple Shao Sword sect. Now that there were so many casualties, he didn't know how to explain it when he returned. This resentment was naturally vented on Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei, those who were dragged down here were more or less injured, but you were the only one who was unharmed. You know better than anyone else what exactly is going on here. You knew that the situation was dangerous, but you still chose to stand by and watch. If you really wanted to save them, you would have done it long ago. Why wait until now? Chu Luiwei was secretly sighing at Song Qingyan's increasing ability to pester endlessly when he heard Lei Laosi scolding him. What the F***ck are you spouting? Just as Song Qingyan was speaking confidently, he shuddered after being yelled at by Lei Laosi and forcefully swallowed the rest of his words. He looked at Lei Laosi angrily and embarrassedly. Who was he? He had never been insulted like this to his face. It was extremely unpleasant. Extremely humiliating. Saving you is kindness. Not saving you is my duty. We came over with good intentions, and it's fine if you don't appreciate it. In the end, you still want to blame us. If you're so capable, why don't you save them yourself? Aren't they all from your Purple Shao Sword sect? What has it got to do with us? Don't think that I can't tell. You were clearly at the same distance as those people just now. It's just that you're selfish and dirty, so you saved this one first. I heard that you're the Purple Shao Sword sect's young master? If the Purple Shao Sword sect's people knew that their young master abandoned his disciple for a woman, I wonder how they would react. Lei Laosi scolded Song Qingyan like a cannonball. Chu Luiwei touched his nose. Back then, Lei Laosi was a rather refined and elegant young master. He didn't expect his appearance to change now, and his ability to scold people had also improved. Song Qingyan was scolded until he couldn't refute at all, and he was so angry that he trembled. It couldn't be helped since Lei Laosi was stronger than him. Although he was arrogant and domineering, he wasn't brainless at all. If they offended Lei Laosi here, who knew if they could still get out? After scolding Song Qingyan, Lei Laosi looked at Yang Qin. And Yang Qin, cowered and hid behind Song Qingyan. Why are you hiding? Lei Laosi didn't know what it meant to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He only knew that anyone who offended Her Highness had to die. You don't look old, but you're really good at sowing discord. If your mouth doesn't know how to speak, I'll sew it up for you. Yang Qin was so frightened that she hurriedly covered her mouth and hid behind Song Qingyan. She didn't dare to make a sound, and only her tears fell. She hugged Song Qingyan's arm and shivered as though she was terrified. If it were any other time, Song Qingyan would definitely stand up for her. But not now. He was just forcing himself to stand there, so how could he care about Yang Qin? Chu Luiwei looked at the two of them in such a sorry state and wasn't interested at all. They were just things that weren't presentable. Now, the person I'm most worried about is still Shangguan Wan. With someone helping, I can't freely investigate Shangguan Wan's situation anymore. Shangguan Wan. I'm afraid she's really going to recover her Yuan Meridian. A series of footsteps was heard. Chu Luiwei turned around and saw that it was actually Jiang Yuqing and the rest. It turned out that they stayed here for too long and didn't go back. The people behind were anxious from waiting, so they simply came together. Seeing Jiang Yuqing in front, Song Qingyan immediately seemed to have found a backer. Yuqing. He and Jiang Yuqing were close in age, and their family backgrounds weren't bad. Thus, they had always been in contact. Jiang Yuqing's gaze first landed on Chu Luiwei. After confirming that she was fine, his heart relaxed slightly before he looked at Song Qingyan. Qingyan, so it's you guys. What happened? Why are you in such a sorry state? Song Qingyan hurriedly went forward and walked to Jiang Yuqing's side. Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Lei Laosi at the side and hurriedly lowered his voice. Yuqing, you guys must be careful of Chu Luiwei. She has a problem. Jiang Yuqing's expression changed slightly. Oh. Song Qingyan continued. Her relationship with that man is unclear. Just now, she even threatened Qin and me. That's strange. The two of them previously said that they would come over to take a look. Logically speaking, They wouldn't do such a thing. How could Jiang Yuqing not guess Song Qingyan's thoughts? If it were in the past, he might still have the patience to feign civility with him. But now, hearing that Chu Luiyue was being slandered, he was very unhappy. He looked at Chu Luiyue. "Lu, are you okay?" Chu Luiyue's face turned cold, and her stomach churned. Digression: I couldn't sleep yesterday. Added at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 736. This was the first time Jiang Yuqing called her this, and Chu Luiyue spent a lot of effort to control her expression. What's wrong with this fellow? However, Song Qingyan at the side was greatly shocked. Yuqing, why you just called her? Jiang Yuqing looks gentle and polite, but he's actually very arrogant. Especially now that his status is different, it's even harder for normal people to get close to him. But now, he actually called Chu Luiyue so intimately. When did the relationship between the two of them become so close? Jiang Yuqing glanced at Song Qingyan and smiled lightly as he explained, "Oh, right. You probably don't know, but when I met with danger previously, I relied on Lu Yu to help me escape. Speaking of which, I owe her half my life." Mu Qinghe and the rest had all seen this scene with their own eyes, so they naturally wouldn't refute him. As for the rest, they had more or less accepted Chu Luiyue's help, so they couldn't thank her enough, let alone say anything. Song Qingyan was completely dazed. At the side, Yang Qin widened her eyes in shock, and she even forgot to cry. "Why, you're saying Chu Luiyue saved you?" asked Song Qingyan in disbelief. Jiang Yuqing nodded and pointed at the crowd behind him. Actually, for the people behind to be able to come out, almost all of them helped. Chu Luiyue's abilities alone are limited, so she naturally can't take on everything. However, no one could deny that she had played the most crucial role in this process. Song Qingyan looked behind him in a daze. Only then did he see the dense mass of people. At a rough glance, there were at least 300 to 400 people. All of this, Chu Luiyue helped? Song Qingyan's heart suffered a huge impact, and he didn't dare to believe it. But the person who said this was Jiang Yuqing, so he had no choice but to believe it. Recalling Chu Luiyue's swift and decisive manner, Song Qingyan gradually recovered his senses. It seems like Chu Luiyue really has some abilities, not to mention that Lei Laosi, he's very capable, but he seems to listen to Chu Luiyue a lot. With his help, it doesn't seem impossible that Chu Luiyue could do all of this. As for why she's safe and sound, that's because she wasn't swept down from the start, and she only came down when we wanted to find one. Jiang Yuqing gave a simple explanation of the situation with just a few words. He said it calmly, but it was like a stone smashed into Song's heart. At this moment, he finally understood how laughable the words he'd said earlier were. In front of Jiang Yuqing, "No. I've become a joke in everyone's eyes." Song Qingyan hurriedly glanced around, and as expected, he discovered that many people were looking at him with unfriendly gazes. Most of them were actually black guards. Whispers could be heard, "Miss Chu is very warm-hearted. She has been helping people along the way. She won't attack anyone, right?" "I think so, too." Purple Shao Sword Sect. I remember that they wanted to find trouble with Miss Chu at Ping Liang Square previously. I'm afraid the bad guys are making the first move. These people didn't speak loudly, but the space was dim and narrow, so any sound could be heard clearly. Song Qingyan was extremely embarrassed and felt as if there was a dagger at his back. Jiang Yuqing smiled. "Qingyan, it seems like you misunderstood something." Song Qingyan's breath was stuck in his chest. After an intense internal struggle, he finally accepted his fate and clenched his teeth. Probably, just as he wanted to brush this matter aside, Lei Laosi crossed his arms and spoke lazily. "You think it's over with just a misunderstanding? You criticized us quite a bit just now, right? Now that things are clear, you don't intend to apologize?" Who did Song Qingyan apologize to? But in this situation, he didn't seem to have a second choice. He could only brace himself and speak to Chu Luiyue. "Sorry." It was just a short word, but it seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. Lei Laosi dug his ears. "What did you say? You're too soft. I didn't hear you." Song Qingyan took a deep breath and could only raise his voice. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you guys. Then, the veins on his forehead could be faintly seen. Yang Qin was originally hiding behind him, hugging his arm and grabbing his hand with both hands. Song Qingyan used so much strength that he actually subconsciously held Yang Qin's hand tightly. Her expression changed, and she almost shouted out in pain. Her hand bones were about to be crushed. Chu Luiwei watched this scene as if he was watching a show. Although she was a little surprised that Jiang Yuqing spoke up for her, she didn't feel anything in her heart and even felt a little nauseous. However, since Jiang Yuqing admitted that he owed her a favor, then it would be a waste if she didn't accept it. Mu Qinghe took 2 steps forward and pointed in a certain direction. I heard some commotion over here just now. Is it because of those 2 people? Chu Luiwei followed his finger and looked over. He was referring to the 2 people who died just now. That's right. Chu Luiwei nodded and briefly explained what had happened. Of course, it was inevitable that she would mention that she wanted to help, but was rejected by Song Qingyan. Chu Luiwei spoke casually as if he did not take it to heart. However, to everyone's ears, they felt that Song Qingyan did not know what was good for him. He actually had the cheek to complain about Chu Luiwei just now? Although no one said anything, they all felt some disdain for Song Qingyan in their hearts. Song Qingyan felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. This was the first time he felt so embarrassed in front of these people. If not for the fact that he was worried about encountering more danger, he would have left immediately. Yang Qin gently tugged at his sleeve and said softly. Only then did Song Qingyan let go of her hand. Yang Qin's wrist was almost broken. She looked down nervously and saw that there seemed to be a red blood stain on her sleeve. She was shocked and immediately wanted to bandage it. The other party seems to have become stronger than before. We have to hurry. Upon hearing this, Yang Qin's expression changed slightly, and she suddenly said hesitantly, Are you looking for the person controlling the tree branch? I remember that the tree root flew from that direction. As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed in a direction. It was dark all around, and no one knew what she was pointing at. Jiang Yuqing frowned slightly. Really? Yang Qin nodded timidly. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes and was about to speak when she suddenly felt an itch by her ear. She turned to look at Dumpling, only to see Dumpling flying straight ahead. Target, Yang Qin. Chu Luiwei found it strange. She was about to ask Dumpling to come back when Dumpling flew over Yang Qin's head. Yang Qin was frightened and screamed. She retreated in a hurry, but Dumpling flapped her wings and she fell. Don't touch me! She shouted in panic, but she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her wrist. Rip! Half of her sleeve was torn off. A terrifying scarlet wound on her wrist was exposed in front of everyone. A strong smell of blood suddenly erupted. It was extremely similar to the smell of the tree root. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 737. Everything happened too quickly. When the wound on her wrist tore open again, Yang Qin knew it was bad. Song Qingyan originally wanted to help her up, but his expression changed slightly when he smelled the smell. Qin, what happened to you? A fierce look flashed across Yang Qin's eyes. Without another word, she turned and fled. Her speed was actually much faster than the realm she had displayed before. Dumpling immediately followed. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the opposite side of Yang Qin. It flapped its wings. A scarlet flame suddenly flew out and condensed into a barrier in the air. Yang Qin was caught off guard. By the time she discovered the flame boundary in front of her, it was already too late to stop. In a panic, she could only throw out a wave of force, wanting to use the rebound force to avoid the flame. However, the flame spread extremely quickly. Yang Qin had just turned around when she realized that she was completely trapped in a cage formed by flames. The scorching heat roasted her, and her entire body was burning. She clenched her teeth and set up a boundary around herself. However, how could her boundary resist the power of a divine beast like Dumpling? Not long later, her boundary began to shake as if it would explode at any time. Chu Luiwei quickly rushed over. Yang Qin's thoughts flashed, and she looked at Song Qingyan with tears in her eyes. "Senior brother Qingyan, save me." Song Qingyan was also secretly puzzled. However, when he saw Yang Qin's tortured appearance, he felt pity for her. He hurriedly said to Chu Luiwei, who had just rushed over, "Chu Luiwei, hurry up and have your magical beast release her. If this goes on, Qin won't be able to take it." However, Chu Luiwei acted as if she didn't hear him and walked straight to the cage formed by flames. Song Qingyan was anxious. Without thinking, he reached out to pull Chu Luiwei. "You didn't listen to what I said." Chu Luiwei suddenly turned her head and looked over. Song Qingyan's movements suddenly paused. The young girl in front of him had a cold expression, and her gaze was as sharp as a knife. However, this cold and indifferent gaze made him feel a deep chill from the bottom of his heart. Song Qingyan's hand froze in midair, but he couldn't continue to reach forward. Chu Luiwei seemed to be even more difficult to provoke than he thought. While he was in a daze, Chu Luiwei had already retracted her warning gaze and looked at Yang Qin with a cold expression. "What's with the injury on your wrist?" Yang Qin turned her head. "I was just accidentally scratched by a tree root." "It's nothing, oh?" Chu Luiwei asked faintly. "Then, the smell just now was also accidentally contaminated by it? That's strange. That smell just now. It seems to be coming from your wound. That was definitely not a normal bloody smell." That smell was exactly the same as the smell she had when she had cut open the roots. This could only mean that Yang Qin's body had also devoured the power of these roots. But how did she do it? Even Jianghu and the rest avoided these tree roots, but Yang Qin was the exact opposite. Yang Qin clenched her teeth. She wanted to defend herself, but Chu Luiwei stared at her as if she could see through everything. At such a time, no matter what she said, it would be like a joke. Seeing that Yang Qin didn't say anything, Song Qingyan panicked. "Qin, what exactly is going on?" She was clearly still trapped in the entanglement of those tree roots just now, so why? But Yang Qin refused to say anything. Chu Luiwei pondered for a while and suddenly took a step forward. Lei Laosi followed her worriedly. Chu Luiwei turned to look at him and shook his head gently. "I'll ask her. Don't worry." Lei Laosi could only stop. But everyone, including him, was staring at Chu Luiwei closely. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes, and a guess flashed across her mind. Previously, there was a period of time when Yang Qin seemed to be quite close to Shangguan, and she would even cook porridge for Shangguan. Back then, Chu Luiwei felt that something was amiss. As the third princess, Shangguan had someone to take care of everything in the palace. Since when did she lack someone to cook porridge for her? Shangguan said that she got along well with Yang Qin, so she let her stay in the palace for a few more days. But even a fool wouldn't believe this. What was even stranger was that those days were actually when Yang Qin testified that Chu Luiwei took away the Long Yuan sword and was proven to be false. According to Shangguan's temper, not only did she not punish Yang Qin, but she even kept her by her side. Chu Luiwei opened her mouth slightly and said something silently. As her back was facing the crowd, only Yang Qin saw her words. "Shangguan used your Yuan meridian, didn't she?" Yang Qin widened her eyes in shock as if she had seen a ghost. They had done this very secretly. How could Chu Luiwei have guessed it? Seeing Yang Qin's reaction, Chu Luiwei was instantly certain of her guess. As expected, Shangguan had already made a move on Yang Qin from then on. It was normal for her to want to do this, but why would Yang Qin agree? Could it be that she was forced by Shangguan's power? Chu Luiwei still remembered Yang Qin's expression when she delivered the porridge. It didn't seem like she was forced. Moreover, after such a long time, other than Yang Qin's body becoming weaker, she didn't seem to be affected much in other aspects. Looking at the strength she displayed just now, she didn't seem weak. Chu Luiwei's gaze landed on the wound on Yang Qin's wrist. Suddenly, her gaze froze. The strength in Yang Qin's body actually came from Shangguan. Although I don't know what method the two of them used, I can be sure that Yang Qin's strength would become stronger along with Shengguan Wan's strength. Then, Shengguan Wan might already know the situation here. Chu Luiwei retreated without hesitation. Yang Qin suddenly looked up and sneered. Want to escape? It's too late. A black rune suddenly flashed across her glabella and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, her aura started to surge. Qin Yi's expression changed, and he immediately said, "Retreat. She's going to self-destruct." Before he could finish his sentence, he had already rushed towards Chu Luiwei. Lei Laosi also sensed that something was amiss and immediately ran. However, the two of them were still one step too late. Boom! A loud explosion was heard. A turbulent and violent energy spread out in all directions. In an instant, flames filled the sky. When Yang Qin's physical body was destroyed, a black ripple appeared in the air. A strong suction force came from inside. It instantly swallowed Chu Luiwei. Her figure disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. "Lui, Miss Chu!" everyone exclaimed in unison. The moment Yang Qin self-destructed, Dumpling instantly flew over and blocked in front of Chu Luiwei. The next moment, Chu Luiwei felt her vision turn black, and she was instantly dragged into darkness by some force. However, just as she was about to retaliate, she suddenly realized that the violent force was isolated outside. A barrier was emitting a lustrous glow, protecting her within it. Chu Luiwei blinked. Crystal barrier? Why did it come out by itself before I could even move? Digression. There's only one more chapter left. I feel embarrassed to keep everyone waiting. I'll update it tomorrow at noon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 738. Just as Chu Luiwei had this question in her heart, she saw a light spot appear in front of her. The surrounding space began to squeeze towards her. Chu Luiwei's expression was slightly restrained as she circulated the force in her body. The next moment, the light in front of her brightened up. Almost at the same time, the crystal barrier suddenly transformed into countless streams of light and silently entered Chu Luiwei's body. Chu Luiwei was shocked. Just as she was about to take a closer look, she suddenly felt that her entire body was pulled out of the narrow and cramped space. Her body staggered, and it took her a lot of effort to stand firm. Chu Luiwei quickly glanced around. The surroundings were constantly surging black swamps. The smell of blood and decay was almost suffocating. She could vaguely see many mutilated corpses. There were countless dancing tree roots above. They were of different thicknesses, but all of them were scarlet in color. Under her feet was a cold and hard stone platform. Chu Luiwei's eyes moved slightly. It was almost all swamps below. The existence of this platform was particularly special. If she guessed correctly, this should be, "It's really you." A sarcastic and cold voice came from behind her. Chu Luiwei couldn't be more familiar with this voice. She turned around. A woman was standing in front of her. There was a faint black barrier around her, blurring her face and figure. However, Chu Luiwei could still see at a glance that it was Shengguan Wan. Next to her feet, there was something. Chu Luiwei looked over, and her pupils shrank slightly. That was her pure gold armor. Without a doubt, it was brought by Shengguan Wan. Shengguan Wan had already taken everything that once belonged to her. How could she let go of the pure gold armor? It was just that looking at it now was a little strange. The pure gold armor was extremely noble. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there was probably no other armor that could compare to it. Logically speaking, Shengguan Wan should value this thing very much. Now it was just casually placed on the ground. There seemed to be some messy bloodstains on the ground beside it. Chu Luiwei calmly withdrew his gaze and looked at Shengguan Wan. "You've been peeping in the dark. Did you enjoy watching?" Shengguan Wan asked sarcastically. Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that Shengguan Wan had already guessed that she was the one who had done those things before. The corners of Chu Luiwei's lips curled into a faint smile. "Third princess, you've misunderstood. I wasn't spying on you. I was just helping everyone find you. Previously, I only took a quick glance and was unable to determine your location. I didn't expect to come here directly this time. If eldest young Master Jiang and the others knew that I had found you, they would be very happy. Shangguan didn't want to listen to a single word Chu Luiyue said, and she wouldn't believe it either. Are you threatening me? Shangguan's expression was cold. It was fine if it was Jiang Yuqing, but the others definitely couldn't know that she was here, let alone what she was doing. Third princess, why do you say that? I'm just an ordinary person. How can I threaten you? As Chu Luiyue spoke, he glanced around unintentionally. Ever since you disappeared, we've been very worried. For this reason, we didn't hesitate to try our best to barge in and even encountered many dangers. Many sect disciples and black cavalry were entangled by those tree roots. Their deaths were really tragic. It's great that you're safe and sound. Shangguan stared at Chu Luiyue and was silent for a while. Then she suddenly sneered. In the silent and cold space, this sound seemed particularly abrupt and cold. Chu Luiyue, you don't have to feign civility in front of me. You know better than anyone how you came here. Yang Qin is already dead. What's the point of saying this? Hearing this, Chu Luiyue's expression faded. It seems like the third princess has admitted that Yang Qin's injuries and death are related to you? She should have died long ago. It's already her blessing that I let her stay for a few more days. At this point, Shangguan was very clear that Chu Luiyue had probably guessed many things. Therefore, she directly brought Chu Luiyue over and laid her cards on the table. But this is the divine beast you just contracted? Shangguan looked at Dumpling, who was on Chu Luiyue's shoulder. Her eyes were filled with jealousy and resentment. If it wasn't for Chu Luiyue, this divine beast would have been hers. What a pity, Shangguan muttered softly, her face filled with dense killing intent. It was a pity that this divine beast had already been contracted and couldn't recognize a new master. So, she could only kill it together with her. It wasn't easy for a divine beast to appear in the world. In the end, not only could she not take it for herself, she even had to take its life. Shangguan's hatred for Chu Luiyue deepened. Dumpling seemed to be a little agitated. Chu Luiyue patted its head gently and comforted it in her heart. When she discovered that Yang Qin might be colluding with Shangguan, she had already expected this situation. Since Shangguan dared to say these words so brazenly, it was obvious that she didn't intend to let her leave alive. Shangguan wanted her life, it wasn't that easy. I remember that you also have a Daijing Yuan meridian, and your grade isn't low? Shangguan sized up Chu Luiyue, her eyes filled with undisguised greed and excitement. Now, she only needed a little bit of strength to completely restore her Yuan meridian. Maybe Chu Luiyue could complete it. After all, Chu Luiyue's strength had always been much stronger than the realm she displayed. Plus, she had a divine beast. Chu Luiyue smiled, but there was no smile in her eyes. It seems that the third princess is very interested in my Yuan meridian? Shangguan couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. It's your honor to be able to serve me. Shangguan raised her hand and waved it forward. A dark blue origin power flew out in an instant. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. At the same time, countless tree roots flew over from all directions. Whoosh, Dumpling's body flashed, and she instantly transformed into her true form. She flapped her huge wings, and scarlet flames surged out. All the tree roots were easily brushed away and were tainted by the scarlet flames. In an instant, the flames soared into the sky. The surrounding darkness was dispelled. It was as bright as day. A violent wind blew. It was oppressive. Shangguan clenched her fists tightly, and her heart was filled with hatred. Even though there was a barrier in front of her, she could still feel the terrifying power of the attacks. The power of a divine beast was so shocking. No wonder Chu Luiyue was so bold. With this red-tailed phoenix, she didn't even need to do anything herself. The huge figure entrenched itself above Chu Luiyue's head, carefully protecting her under its wings. The surrounding flames shone brightly on Chu Luiyue's face and body. Shangguan gritted her teeth and glared at her. Chu Luiyue's expression was indifferent. When she met Shangguan Wan's resentful and jealous gaze, she suddenly smiled. Shangguan Wan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. That smile, those eyes, that expression, it was very similar to the person who was wrapped in flames in the Imperial Ancestral Hall that day. Shangguan Wan unconsciously took half a step back, extremely shocked. You, who exactly are you? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 739. Everything was like the scene from that day. It was like a nightmare. Shangguan Wan's body was trembling and her face was pale. Chu Luiyue smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. Me? I'm Chu Luiyue. How can third princess not recognize me? Her tone was light, as if she was teasing her. Shangguan Wan took a deep breath and kept telling herself in her heart that this was Chu Luiyue. This was Chu Luiyue. But the firelight reflected on her beautiful face, making it half bright and half dark. It was very similar to Shangguan Yu. Chu Luiyue took a step forward and seemed a little worried. Third princess, what's wrong? Don't come over. Don't come over. Shangguan Wan screamed. At the same time, she hurriedly stepped back and accidentally fell to the ground. Chu Luiyue stopped and stood there, quietly looking at Shangguan Wan with a smile. For a moment she seemed to be high and mighty. Shangguan Wan looked at Chu Luiyue, her heart beating wildly. Chu Luiyue stood there and looked down at her, as if she had done it countless times. Shangguan Wan's face burned. It was too embarrassing for her to be in such a sorry state. Chu Luiyue was Chu Luiyue. Who else could she be? No one knew better than her that Shangguan Yu was dead. He was completely and utterly dead. There was no chance of her coming back to life. An illusion, these were all illusions. Shangguan Wan forced herself to stand up. The way she looked at Chu Luiyue gradually became fierce. Even if Chu Luiyue didn't discover all this today and didn't barge in, she definitely wouldn't let her stay for long. Her face alone was enough to kill her 10,000 times. Chu Luiyue. You're Chu Luiyue. Shangguan Wan said hatefully. No one knew who she was repeating it to. Chu Luiyue looked at her with interest. Shangguan Wan's reaction was really interesting. Chu Luiyue originally thought that Shangguan Wan was full of hatred for her and would be very happy after killing her back then. But now, it wasn't that she wasn't guilty and afraid. Chu Luiyue was suddenly curious. If Shangguan Wan knew that she was really Shangguan Yu, what would her expression be? No matter who you are, you deserve to die. Shangguan Wan's heart was filled with anger and fear. Even though she kept convincing herself in her heart that this person was Chu Luiyue. However, countless scenes from the past appeared in the past. The intense emotions caused her facial features to distort. A black aura was faintly discernible between her brows, and there was a faint green light in her eyes. From afar, she looked like a malicious spirit. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Just now, she was a little puzzled. When did Shangguan Wan's force turn green? She didn't expect that there would be flames of the same color dancing in her eyes now. It looked very strange. Could it be that she had used a special method to devour other people's yuan meridians? Shangguan Wan attacked again. This time, she used almost all of her strength. The berserk power carried a terrifying pressure as it came crashing down. The space around Chu Luiyue was instantly compressed. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on her body, and even the flow of the force in her body slowed down. At this moment, Shangguan Wan's strength had definitely reached rank 8. Although Chu Luiyue had already broken through to rank 5, there was still a huge gap between her and Shangguan Wan. Dumpling let out a clear cry. Screech! A ball of red flames instantly condensed into a barrier, protecting Chu Luiyue in the middle. At the same time, it flapped its wings and several feathers flew out. They were like sharp swords that pierced toward Shangguan Wan. Thud thud thud. The feathers that emitted a gorgeous glow and carried a powerful aura, fiercely hitting the black barrier in front of Shangguan Wan. The black barrier trembled. Shangguan Wan gritted her teeth. It would be difficult to devour Chu Luiyue's power in a short period of time. That crimson gold pill phoenix by her side was seriously too powerful. The most important thing for her now was to recover her yuan meridian. She asked in her heart, Senior, do you have a way to deal with that divine beast? After a moment, a hoarse voice lazily sounded. I can help you stall that red gold phoenix for half an hour. Whether you can kill Chu Luiyue or not will depend on your ability. Thank you, Senior. Shang Wanwan was overjoyed. As long as there was no interference from that divine beast, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to deal with Chu Luiyue? Not to mention half an hour, she could take Chu Luiyue's life with a single move. Then, a black rune appeared between Shang Wanwan's brows. Then, it floated out. A cold aura spread out from it. It quietly passed through the barrier and drew an arc in the air. Chu Luiyue looked at it and suddenly felt a chill in her heart. The force that forcefully dragged her over just now seemed to be exactly the same as the aura of this rune. Could it be that this was the mysterious existence that was secretly helping Shang Wanwan? A sense of uneasiness suddenly welled up in her heart. This rune was definitely more difficult to deal with than Shang Wanwan. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiyue saw that the rune had already flown towards Dumpling. Several black lines floated out from the surface of the sword. Those lines were even thinner than a strand of hair. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Tuanzi's body burned with red flames in an instant. Her pair of dazzling crystal-like eyes were also shining brightly. However, when the flames touched the black lines, they actually didn't burn. The black lines passed through the flames and quickly outlined a huge net. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened and immediately wanted Dumpling to retreat. However, it was already too late. That huge net directly trapped Dumpling. At the same time, Shang Wanwan rushed over. She threw a simple and direct punch. Die. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 740. Just as Chu Luiyue and Shang Wanwan were in an intense battle, the people left behind were also very anxious. Yang Qin's sudden self-destruction caught everyone off guard. By the time they reacted, Chu Luiyue's figure had already disappeared. The only thing left on the battlefield was the violent aftermath of the explosion. Lei Laosi stared at the empty space, feeling angry and regretful as his chest heaved up and down. Her Highness was right in front of me, yet I actually couldn't protect her well. She could only watch helplessly as she was dragged into the void. 2 years ago, we weren't by Her Highness's side, which gave those people a chance. But now, the blood in Lei Laosi's body surged as he raised his hand, wanting to slap himself. Laosi! Qin Yi, who was standing beside him, suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi's raised hand instantly stopped in midair. He looked up and saw his big brother looking at him with a calm expression and a hint of warning in his eyes. If we overreact now, we'll definitely be suspected by others. Jiang Yuqing, Mu Qinghe, and the rest are still watching from behind. Qin Yi's silent warning made Lei Laosi come to his senses. He clenched his teeth and put his hand back, but his fists were tightly clenched, and the veins on his forehead were faintly visible. What happened just now? Jiang Yuqing hurriedly walked over with a cold and stern expression. Qin Yi turned around with a calm expression. Yang Qin self-destructed and tore open the empty space. The mastermind also forcefully dragged her away. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. This means that there's indeed something wrong with Yang Qin? Who exactly is the mastermind behind this? Qin Yi shook his head and looked at Song Qingyan. Song Qingyan instantly looked like he was scalded. Why are you looking at me? What do you mean by that gaze? Yang Qin is from the Purple Shao Sword sect, and she's very close to you, young Master Song. Now that something happened to her, don't you have anything to say? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every single word was extremely sharp. It directly raised Song Qingyan's suspicion to the highest level. The surrounding people all looked over suspiciously. That's right. Everyone had clearly seen how Song Qingyan had protected Yang Qin, with all his might just now. Did he not know that there was something wrong with Yang Qin? Song Qingyan said angrily. What can I say? I don't know anything. Initially, he wanted to defend Yang Qin, but in this situation, any words would be useless. Yang Qin or had chosen to self-destruct. If this wasn't a guilty conscience, then what was? Coupled with her strange wound from before, even Song Qingyan was well aware that she must be hiding something. The person was already dead, and the most important thing now was to clear himself of suspicion. Oh, you were so close to her. Do you really not know anything about what she said or did? Qini asked. Song Qingyan felt extremely aggrieved. I really don't know. Even if I ask you 100 times, you still don't know. How long had Yang Qin been in the Purple Shao Sword sect? He was also attracted to her because she was beautiful and gentle, which was why he got close to her. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? Qingyan, I believe that this matter has nothing to do with you, but any clues are very important now. If there's anything wrong with her, feel free to tell me if you know anything. The person who said this was Jiang Yuqing. Song Qingyan looked at him in disbelief. This means? Jiang Yuqing is clearly suspicious of me. Just as he was about to refute, he saw Jiang Yuqing's serious expression, as if he was very concerned about this matter. He was clearly concerned about Chu Luiyue. Song Qingyan had some understanding of Jiang Yuqing. Seeing his reaction, he could basically guess what he was thinking and could not help but be secretly shocked. Mu Qinghe, who was at the side, glanced at Jiang Yuqing without batting an eyelid. Jiang Yuqing looked gentle and polite, but he was actually cold-hearted and ruthless. The person he valued the most was himself. Shangguan had been missing for so long, but he had never been so anxious. Chu Luiyue just disappeared, yet he already couldn't hold it in. Mu Qinghe looked down and suppressed the guess in her heart. I'm afraid that Jiang Yuqing himself hasn't noticed this, right? I really don't know anything. If I knew, why would I waste so much effort to save her just now? Why would I speak up for her? Song Qingyan defended himself. Nothing could be seen from Jiang Yuqing's expression, but his eyes were deep and obscure. It seems like I really can't get anything out of Song Qingyan. He looked at Qin Yi again. Young Master Qin, do you have a way to find her current location? The moment he said that, he heard footsteps behind him. I know where she is. The cold and indifferent voice of a youth sounded. The surroundings fell silent. Qin Yi looked at the golden-haired youth standing in front of him. His expression was cold, and his lips were slightly pursed. Only his eyes were filled with determination. Qin Yi narrowed his eyes. Chang Wanzhou continued. I'll bring you to save her. Qin Yi gave a half-smile. Why me? Because you're the strongest. You can help her. Chang Wanzhou stared at him fixedly. He didn't say the remaining half of his sentence. It's also because Chu Luiyue trusts Qin. He could clearly see that Chu Luiyue trusted Qin Yi and Lei Laosi a lot. Even though he didn't know why, he trusted her. Qin Yi paused and nodded. Jiang Yuqing immediately asked, why? Then where exactly is she? The moment he asked that, Jiang Yuqing realized that he was too anxious. His expression changed and he added, if we go together, we'll go together. The chances of success will be higher. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran had already followed them and seemed to want to go together. Chang Wanzhou glanced at Jiang Yuqing and slowly swept his gaze across the crowd. She's very far from here. If too many people go, it will only drag down the speed. Jiang Yuqing's face was a little ugly. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran originally wanted to go, but they hesitated when they heard that. Then you guys go first. It's more important to save Lu Yu first. Don't worry about us. Even though Mu Hongyu was also very worried, she still said that. She had a faint yuan body and could teleport, so it was actually more convenient for her compared to the others. However, she wasn't sure if her current skills were enough. It wouldn't be good if she became everyone's burden when she went there. Yi Ranran also nodded seriously. Big brother Qin, you guys go first. Since they already said that, the others couldn't say anything else. Qin Yi raised his hand and gently waved it, tearing open space. Then he stepped in. Chang Wanzhou followed closely behind. Lei Laosi was about to follow when Qin Yi glanced at him and lightly shook his head. Protect them well. After that, the two of them completely disappeared. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and fell into deep thought. If Chu Luiwei was really taken away by Shangguan Wan just now, I actually know the location. Digression. Continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 741. Jiang Yuqing was very conflicted, as if there were two of him arguing in his mind. On one hand, if Shangguan Wan really did all this, she definitely wouldn't leave Chu Luiwei alive. Even if Qin Yi and the rest went over, they might not be able to save Chu Luiwei. On the other hand, Chu Luiwei probably already knew something. If she made it out of here alive, she would undoubtedly be a huge hidden danger to Shangguan Wan. She might even implicate me. After all, I'm in the same boat as Shangguan Wan. If Chu Luiwei exposed what Shangguan Wan did, our marriage would definitely be ruined. Shangguan Wan, together with him, would suffer a disastrous fall in status. There were already many people in Xiling City who hated him. Once he lost his power, it went without saying what awaited him. After thinking for a long time, Jiang Yuqing's gaze gradually turned cold. At this point, Chu Luiwei and Shangguan Wan didn't know what was happening in another place. Shangguan Wan threw a punch. This punch was extremely simple and clean. There weren't any fancy moves and only an extremely domineering force. A ghostly green fist shadow flew out, silently tearing through space. It drew a perfect arc in midair. Finally, it went straight for Chu Luiwei's face. The space in front of Chu Luiwei was harshly squeezed. Under this valiant suppression, Chu Luiwei felt as if something heavy was pressing down on every part of her body, and it was extremely painful and unbearable. Her entire body seemed to have been frozen, and even moving became extremely difficult. A Stage 8 warrior's all-out attack. Even Chu Luiwei wouldn't be able to face it head-on. Chu Luiwei's eyes flashed with coldness as she watched the rapidly approaching fist shadows. Buzz. The water droplet in her dantian suddenly started spinning. Boundless energy surged out and instantly filled her limbs and bones. With the support of this power, the pressure on Chu Luiwei was greatly reduced. With a slight movement of her feet, she disappeared from the spot. The shadow of the fist missed. Shangguan Wan narrowed her eyes and sneered. You do have some skills. Chu Luiwei's aura was clearly much stronger than before. From the looks of it, she indeed had a trump card that could not be underestimated. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to dodge her full-force attacks so easily. No wonder Chu Luiwei was able to obtain first place in the previous competitions. Shangguan Wan's heart was filled with disdain. You want to rely on this little bit of strength to escape today? I'm afraid you're too naive. No matter how many tricks he had, they were all jokes in the face of absolute power. An idea popped up in Shangguan Wan's mind, and the fist shadow suddenly changed its direction and continued charging toward Chu Luiwei. However, at this moment, a silver ray of light flew out from Chu Luiwei's hand. Shangguan Wan narrowed her eyes and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that it was the dagger that Chu Luiwei had used before. She raised the corner of her mouth in a mocking smile. You want to rely on this thing to break this consort's attack? What a joke! As the saying goes, an inch longer is an inch stronger. A handy yuan instrument could often increase a cultivator's combat power. However, Chu Luiwei seemed to have always used this dagger. No matter how sharp and useful this dagger was, it was still easily inferior to swords, spears, swords, and halberds. Therefore, from Shangguan Wan's point of view, Chu Luiwei's insistence on using this dagger was just asking for trouble. However, in the next second, her complacent and disdainful smile froze on her face. This was because Chu Luiwei's dagger had harshly split her fist shadow in half. It was extremely fast. The fist shadow's power did not seem to be of any use as it was torn apart just like that. The condensed power instantly dissipated. Chu Luiwei had already retreated and set up a barrier in front of him, blocking the violent energy outside. Shangguan Wan was both shocked and furious. The dagger in Chu Luiwei's hand, there was clearly something wrong with it. Perhaps it's also a rare treasure. No wonder she never let it go. If it were any other time, Shangguan Wan might have some interest in that dagger. However, at this moment, her heart was filled with thoughts of killing Chu Luiyue as soon as possible. Since her first attack had failed, she quickly made another move. This time, she was much more serious. Her figure flashed, and she rushed in front of Chu Luiyue. Although Chu Luiyue was fast, he was not as fast as Shang Guanwan, who was moving at full speed. Moreover, under such circumstances, she did not intend to continue hiding. Shang Guanwan's hands formed a seal in front of her. The dark green force surged out one after another and formed a palm print in front of Shang Guanwan. This palm print was about the size of her hand and emitted a sparkling glow. The surrounding power began to gather towards this palm print. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. She was too familiar with this move that Shang Guanwan used. This was because this was a palm technique that only the disciples of the Tianling dynasty's royal family could cultivate, Lingxiao palm. Most importantly, although this was an earth rank martial skill, the power that it could unleash was enough to reach the heaven rank. Shang Guanwan's hands paused, and then she changed her posture slightly. The surrounding energy began to surge towards the palm print even more violently. Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. The Lingxiao palm was divided into 3 levels. The first level was something that all the disciples of the royal family could cultivate, but the second level required the cultivator's strength to reach the 7th rank before they were qualified to continue cultivating. This requirement might be a little high for ordinary people. But for the disciples of the Tianling royal family, it was not difficult. However, not everyone was able to successfully cultivate the second level. Because the Lingxiao palm was obscure and difficult to understand, many people were unable to enter the second level. As for the third level, it could only be continued after reaching the 8th rank. Although the current Shang Guanwan had barely reached the 8th rank, her Yuan meridian was damaged, and it was impossible for her to continue studying it. Therefore, she only displayed the strength of the second level. However, in her opinion, this was enough to deal with Chu Luiyue. To be able to make me use the second level of the Lingxiao palm, you can be considered to have died a worthy death. Chu Luiyue's expression was cold, and a mocking smile flashed across the corner of her mouth. Speaking of which, Shang Guanwan could not learn the second level no matter how hard she tried. She had to secretly beg her and learn from her. At that time, Shang Guanwan finally succeeded in cultivating it after her patient guidance. She was overjoyed and tactfully said that she hoped to give her father a surprise. How could Shang Guanyu not know what she meant back then? However, she did not mind and took the initiative to say that she would not reveal this matter. To outsiders, she would only say that Shang Guanwan had comprehended it herself. After the news spread, many people praised Shang Guanwan for her intelligence. Even her father's attitude towards Shang Guanwan was much gentler. He said that he could not tell when she was young, but she had become smarter as she grew older. Chu Luiyue's hand moved slightly in her sleeve. Since she was the one who taught her back then, it was time for her to return it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 742. Chu Luiyue held his breath and concentrated. The force in his body quickly surged toward his right hand. A starlight suddenly lit up on his fingertip. Soon, the starlight separated and floated to the finger beside him. In the blink of an eye, all 3 fingers on Chu Luiyue's right hand had lit up. But it did not stop. The 4th starlight appeared shakily. Although it looked a little weaker than the previous 3, it still appeared. The surrounding energy surged, as if it wanted to rush over. However, Chu Luiyue waved his other hand gently and repelled all the dirty energy. Shang Guanwan might not mind. She might even be happy to devour the surrounding energy. She could not dislike. It was too dirty. Therefore, Chu Luiyue simply continued to mobilize the energy in his body. The water droplets spun quickly. The 5 patterns fluctuated, and the majestic force continuously surged toward Chu Luiyue. Sensing that Chu Luiyue had isolated the surrounding energy, but his aura was still rising rapidly, Shang Guanwan's expression changed slightly. How did he do it? Could it be that Chu Luiyue had other trump cards? This momentary distraction caused the energy that Shang Guanwan was gathering to become chaotic for a moment. She quickly focused and stabilized it with great difficulty. Seeing that the green palm print had finally returned to normal, Shangguan closed her eyes. She felt somewhat sullen. It was true that she had learned the second level, but a large part of it was actually copied from Shangguan. Because she did not fully comprehend it, she had to follow every step that Shangguan had taught her when she used this move. If there were any mistakes in the process, all her efforts would be for naught. On one hand, Shangguan was proud that she could cultivate to the second level. On the other hand, she was trapped because she could not use it freely. Every time she used the move, she would be greatly restricted. Moreover, every time she used it, she would inevitably think of Shangguan. For this reason, Shangguan would not use this move under normal circumstances. However, he needed to end the battle quickly, so this was the best choice. Lines glowing faintly appeared on the palm. From afar, they looked like palm prints. The finer the palm print was, the stronger the power it contained. Different cultivators had different insights and understandings of this move, so the palm lines they drew were also different. However, Shangguan learned it from Shangguan, so her palm prints were very similar to hers. However, it was much simpler than Shangguan's. When Shangguan finished the last stroke, the fifth star quietly appeared on Chu Liyue's fingertips. Chu Liyue looked up and her gaze lingered on Shangguan's palm print for a moment. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. After such a long time, Shangguan's cultivation of the Lingxiao palm did not improve at all. Well, her Yuan meridian was destroyed, so she could not even compare to ordinary cultivators. How could she still comprehend the Lingxiao palm? It must have been hard for her to memorize these little by little, not daring to forget them. Chu Liyue raised her hand gently. 5 stars shone brightly. She had already memorized the stupefying god art by heart. Therefore, after breaking through to the 5th stage, she naturally comprehended the stupefying god art. Now, because the force in her body was much more abundant, she could finally light up all 5 stars. You think you can compete with my palm technique? Shangguan sneered. She cultivated the martial technique of the Tianling dynasty, which had been passed down for thousands of years. How could Chu Liyue compare to it? Chu Liyue did not seem to hear her and gently pushed her palm forward. A silver palm print floated in the air. The light was bright but not dazzling. However, the surrounding space started to collapse silently, and a circle of black appeared. The palm print floated there quietly, but it contained a pressure that could not be underestimated. Shangguan's expression changed slightly. Chu Liyue's move seemed to be an earth stage martial technique. She frowned and scolded herself for thinking too much. Even if it was an earth stage martial technique, Chu Liyue was so much weaker than her. She could not compete with her. With a thought, she pushed the palm print out. Lingxiao palm. The dark green palm print flew forward noiselessly. At the same time, Chu Liyue's silver palm print also started to move. She actually chose to fight head-on with Shangguan. You overestimate yourself. Shangguan sneered disdainfully. The 2 palm prints quickly approached each other. Before they even touched, the power of both sides began to fight crazily. The space between the 2 shattered one after another. Even a crack had appeared on the stone platform below. A dark green light flashed through the crack. Shangguan did not notice this. Chu Liyue seemed to have sensed something and suddenly stared at the crack. Something was wrong. It was an intuition. Even if there seemed to be no problem now, she still felt a faint sense of uneasiness in her heart. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation in front of her. Chu Liyue quickly looked up. After a fierce battle, the power of the Jingshan palm was gradually devoured, and it began to slowly retreat. On the other hand, although Shangguan's Lingxiao palm consumed a lot of power, because her level was much higher than Chu Liyue's, the power contained in her palm was also more abundant. At a glance, the Lingxiao palm was gradually gaining the upper hand. Shangguan spurred on, "Go!" The Lingxiao palm was quickly approaching. It seemed that she intended to completely devour the Jingshan palm. At this moment, the Jingshan palm suddenly exploded. Countless starlight scattered. Shangguan thought that she had won this time. Just as a smug smile appeared on her face, she saw that the starlight did not dissipate. Instead, it burst out with a dazzling light. For a moment, the light was dazzling. The dazzling light illuminated the place as if it was daytime. Sizzle. When the light surrounded the Lingxiao palm, there was a burst of ear-piercing sound at the edge. It sounded like something was being burned crazily. The palm print began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. An unpleasant smell quickly spread out. Sheng Guanwan was shocked and could not believe what she saw. How was this possible? Chu Luiwei was only a stage 5 warrior. How could her palm technique have such terrifying power? But at this moment, Chu Luiwei suddenly moved. Her two hands formed a strange gesture in front of her. Sheng Guanwan took a look and felt that the gesture was somewhat familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen it before. Then Chu Luiwei raised her hand and gently drew in the air. The starlight in the sky surged. It had formed a pattern. Sheng Guanwan stared at it closely, afraid that she would miss something. Chu Luiwei's movements were very slow, so Sheng Guanwan could see it very clearly. She even unconsciously sketched it in her mind. Slowly, she finally realized that something was wrong. The pattern drawn by Chu Luiwei was gradually overlapping with the palm print pattern of the second level of the Lingxiao palm. Digression, sure, don't ask. If you ask, it means that the 6th watch is at 6:30. If you ask again, you will be procrastinating. Cough. Slipping away, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Back then, after Chu Luiwei broke through to the 8th rank, he began to cultivate the last level of the Lingxiao palm. Her comprehension ability was extremely high, and it did not take her long to completely comprehend it. But no one knew about it except herself. Even his father, the emperor, knew nothing about this. At that time, she just did it as a matter of course and did not think of announcing it to show off. After all, she was already the most noble existence. Naturally, she did not need to use such a method to prove her excellence like Sheng Guanwan. And now, this had given her a lot of convenience. Because he was worried about exposing his identity, Chu Luiwei had not used any of the martial arts skills he knew since his rebirth. If not for Sheng Guanwan's move today, Chu Luiwei would not have thought of using this move to deal with her. The cultivation of the Lingxiao palm was divided into 3 levels. Each level was a summary and transcendence of the previous level, and the 3rd level was even more so. Sheng Guanwan had cultivated the 2nd level, and the palm print had already left a deep imprint in her heart. Now, as long as she saw the patterns on the 3rd level, she would involuntarily start to cultivate according to this level. But she didn't even comprehend the 2nd level, let alone the 3rd level. After looking at it, the only result was that this part of Sheng Guanwan's cultivation was completely disintegrated. Sheng Guanwan herself must have realized that something was wrong, which was why she was so flustered and exasperated. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chu Luiwei did not say a word and only continued to outline the remaining patterns. When Sheng Guanwan raised her head and accidentally saw it, she only felt as if someone had taken a knife and forcefully carved this pattern in her mind. Sensing that the impression in her mind was becoming more and more chaotic, Sheng Guanwan finally couldn't take it anymore and screamed. Then, she rushed toward Chu Luiwei with scarlet eyes. Slut! Trying to mystify in front of this consort, you're courting death. Chu Luiwei's eyes narrowed dangerously. He hooked his finger lightly and added the last pattern. Finally, he stopped. Sheng Guanwan was getting closer and closer. She was about to charge over. Chu Luiwei pulled with both hands. That huge pattern instantly floated over. Sheng Guanwan only saw a flash in front of her eyes. That strange pattern appeared in front of her again. Chu Luiwei spoke softly as if he was guiding her, but also as if he was ruling. Let's see how your Lingxiao palm is like. As soon as he finished speaking, Sheng Guanwan's mind exploded. Lingxiao palm. In an instant, it was as if something had suddenly broken. As if out of control, the 2 patterns in her mind were completely mixed together. The 2nd layer of palm lines, which was deeply imprinted like a brand, instantly shattered and dissipated. Shangguan body trembled and she violently spat out a mouthful of blood. She clearly felt as if something was rapidly flowing out of her body. Ling Xiaopom, Ling Xiaopom. Shangguan raised her eyes with difficulty and looked at the shattered palm print, only to see that the palm lines on it had completely shattered. Chu Liyue's eyes were cold and sharp. He formed a whip with his force and viciously lashed it out. That ghostly green palm print collapsed along with it. What she could give Shangguan back then, she could take away today. Ling Xiaopom? She didn't deserve it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 744. Shangguan let out a shrill cry as she hugged her head in extreme pain. She frantically wanted to keep all the memories of the Ling Xiaopom in her mind. However, everything was like sand in her hands. The more she tried to salvage it, the more futile her efforts were. Previously, her mind was in a mess, but now, it gradually became blank. No, I learned the Ling Xiaopom with much difficulty. How can I forget it just like that? Once I fall to the second stage today, it will be harder than ascending to heaven if I want to cultivate it again in the future. Shangguan panicked as she panted heavily. One of her hands unconsciously tugged at her hair, causing strands of hair to fall. However, Shangguan could no longer care about it. The strange pattern that Chu Liyue drew forcefully destroyed the Ling Xiaopom in her mind. It was as if it was effortless. When the last pattern completely disappeared, Shangguan's actions finally slowed down. It's gone, it's really gone. I really fell to the second stage of the Ling Xiaopom. No matter how hard I tried to recall, there was nothing in my mind. When I thought about it for a long time, I would even feel a sharp pain. Shangguan weakly took 2 steps back. Her legs turned to jelly, and she almost fell to the ground. Chu Liyue gently exhaled, and his back was drenched in sweat. Actually, with her current Stage 5 warrior abilities, it was very difficult for her to execute the 3rd stage of the Ling Xiaopom. Even just drawing the pattern had used up a lot of her force. Without the support of the water droplet in her dantian, she definitely wouldn't have been able to do this. This attack seemed very simple, but it had actually used up more than half of her body's strength. However, the good thing was that the effect was not bad. It seems like your so-called Ling Xiaopom isn't very good. Chu Liyue spoke softly with a smile on his lips. When Shangguan heard this voice, it was as if she suddenly realized something as she suddenly looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her face was filled with resentment. Liyue. Shangguan called out Chu Liyue's name word by word. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between her teeth. His tone was filled with deep resentment, as if he wanted nothing more than to drink his blood and eat his flesh. He had thought that he could easily get rid of Chu Liyue, but he had not expected to suffer a double loss. There was something wrong with Chu Liyue. The move she used just now was a despicable move that he didn't know where she learned it from. Shangguan couldn't figure it out, but she didn't want to continue investigating. There was only one thought in her mind right now: to kill Chu Liyue. If Chu Liyue was not dealt with today, there would be no end of trouble in the future. Although she didn't like Chu Liyue before, she didn't take Chu Liyue seriously at all. But today, Shangguan finally realized that Chu Liyue was much harder to deal with than she had expected. Anger and resentment surged in her heart, almost bursting out of Shangguan's chest. Her intense emotions made her crazy, and her facial features were slightly distorted. In the depths of her eyes, a dark green fire could be vaguely seen. It looked like a ferocious ghost. At this point, a clear cry was heard. Shangguan was shocked. She turned around and saw that the crimson gold phoenix had already broken free from the black net and was angrily rushing out. It was heading straight for her. The red fire surged, and the entire space instantly turned into a sea of fire. The crimson gold phoenix's crystal-like eyes flashed with extremely cold, murderous intent. Shangguan's entire body turned cold. It was as if she was instantly surrounded by the Grim Reaper. Danger! She hurriedly got up and ran away without thinking. But the moment she turned around, a fire suddenly attacked her. Shangguan was shocked. She hurriedly dodged and accidentally fell to the ground. Lowering her head, she saw that her skirt was already stained with the red fire. She hurriedly extinguished the fire. However, Dumpling had the intention to kill this time. How could she let her off so easily? The surrounding flames burned crazily, and from all directions, they rushed towards Shangguan to kill her. In a moment of desperation, Shangguan hurriedly set up a barrier around her. At the same time, she ran towards the crimson gold armor that was thrown on the ground. Even if the crimson gold armor had not officially recognized her as its owner, when she wore it, it would still be able to provide some defense. Shangguan was forced to the point that she had no other choice. In a state of panic, she could only think of these methods to deal with it. But just as she was about to reach the crimson gold armor, a terrifying aura suddenly attacked from the side. Shangguan was stunned, and a trace of fear surged in her heart. Suddenly, a black rune appeared in the void, blocking in front of Shangguan. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely. Chu Liuyue's pupils constricted. The fireball formed by the red flames was actually completely blocked by the black rune. With the help of the black rune, Shangguan successfully put on the crimson gold armor again. Touching the cold and hard armor, Shangguan's heart calmed down. Chu Liyue stared at the black rune and narrowed his eyes. This was Shangguan's true backing. Shangguan was protected by the barrier and finally had time to breathe. She said in her heart, "Thank you, senior." However, the other party only replied coldly, "Useless thing." Shangguan was reprimanded, but she didn't dare to refute. She didn't even dare to show a trace of dissatisfaction. She didn't expect that she would be forced to such a state by a mere Chu Liyue. Senior is right. It's all this junior's fault for underestimating the enemy. Even if you use your full strength, I'm afraid the situation won't be any better than now, right? That hoarse voice had a hint of mockery. Don't forget, you're now a trash who hasn't even recovered your Yuan Meridian. Shangguan might be able to gain the upper hand in the first few moves, but as time passed, she wouldn't be able to hold on. In the end, wasn't she still being beaten up by Chu Liyue? Shangguan bit her lips angrily, and a trace of blood seeped out of her lips. However, her lips and teeth were already full of blood. This was not worth mentioning at all. In the end, I still have to do it personally. That voice said coldly. Shangguan was shocked and felt complicated. Senior, buzz? A strange buzz could be heard all of a sudden. Then, the black runes slowly flew to Shangguan's glabella. This time, the edge of the black rune seemed to be burning with flames and curled slightly. Before Shangguan could speak, there was a subtle change in her expression. Her expression quickly faded away, leaving only indifference and coldness. Her eyes also became even more scarlet. Her entire body was filled with a monstrous murderous aura. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Dumpling! Hearing her call, Dumpling, who had intended to fight head-on, quickly flew back. The next moment, Shangguan raised her hand and tapped lightly in the air. Boom! A violent gale spread out in all directions. The space around Chu Liyue quickly collapsed. Then, her body flew forward uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 745. Shangguan's hand went straight for Chu Liyue's slender neck. It was as if with a slight twist, she could break this slender and fair neck and completely take away Chu Liyue's life. Chu Liyue's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying pressure, and she couldn't move. A murderous intent flashed across Dumpling's eyes, and she immediately chased after her. Shangguan raised her eyes and looked at Dumpling expressionlessly. The huge net that she had just broken free from was once again blocking in front of her. Moreover, this net had clearly been repaired, and it was even more dense and difficult to deal with than before. Dumpling's speed slowed down. However, in this moment of slowing down, the distance between Chu Liyue and Shangguan had rapidly shortened. Shangguan Wan's meticulously trimmed nails were about to scratch Chu Liyue's creamy skin. Suddenly, a vigorous aura erupted from Chu Liyue's body. Shangguan Wan's wooden expression finally cracked. She retreated in shock, but her eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. No wonder you're so arrogant. So you still have such a trump card. That aura just now was clearly above a 9th stage warrior. Chu Liyue's body actually hid such a strong warrior's strength. Although Shangguan Wan's voice didn't change, her tone was different from before, as if she had changed into a different person. Without her control and threat, Chu Liyue fell from the sky. When her feet stepped on the ground again, she let out a long breath in her heart and said gratefully, "Thank you, Taizu." She really didn't expect that Taizu would take the initiative to attack in that situation just now. Taizu didn't say anything, but he firmly protected Chu Liyue. Shangguan Wan looked at Chu Liyue suspiciously. Chu Liyue also looked up at the other side. This time, both sides fell into a short silence and stalemate. The air seemed to have condensed, and it was suffocating. On the surface, this was a duel between Shangguan Wan and Chu Liyue, but in reality, it was no longer. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation in the air. Shangguan Wan immediately turned her head to look. Her expression was cold. This scene must not be seen by anyone. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly heard a sound that was neither loud nor soft. Seemed like something had broken? Shangguan Wan looked down. A crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the stone platform. Chu Liyue also saw this scene. But in reality, she knew that this crack had been there for a long time. That crack was slowly but surely spreading in all directions, expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The uneasiness in Chu Liyue's heart grew stronger. She quickly summoned Dumpling. Just as a hand touched Dumpling's neck, she saw a faint green light rush out from the crack. Then the entire stone platform was filled with cracks. It began to collapse. At the same time, countless tree roots fell from above. They swept toward the two of them. Chu Liyue quickly jumped onto Dumpling's back. However, at that moment, the entire stone platform collapsed. The faint green light lit up the entire space. Then, a terrifying suction force came from below. Shangguan Wan's feet were empty, and she fell straight down. She was about to be devoured. However, at that moment, she suddenly grabbed a tree root and shook it to Chu Liyue's side. She grabbed Chu Liyue's ankle. Chu Liyue wanted to defend, but she suddenly realized that she could not use the force around her. It was the same for Taizu's force. In that moment, Shangguan Wan grabbed Chu Liyue. Then she pulled fiercely. Everything happened too quickly. Before Chu Liyue could react, she was already forcefully pulled down. Chu Liyue raised her leg and kicked Shangguan Wan fiercely. Shangguan Wan's face immediately turned to the side from the kick. A few of her teeth also fell out. In her panic, she only had time to put on the pure gold sacred armor and forgot to put on the helmet. However, she quickly reacted. As long as Chu Liyue did not hurt her head or face, she could easily take down Chu Liyue. Enveloped by the faint green light, both of them could not use their force. They could only rely on their physical strength. Shangguan Wan's eyes were fierce. She grabbed Chu Liyue's ankle tightly and pushed hard. Chu Liyue fell. Dumpling flapped her wings and scratched Shangguan Wan's face fiercely. Her sharp claws instantly scratched Shangguan Wan's face. The few scratches were shocking. They were so deep that the bones could be seen. Shangguan Wan screamed and was about to think of a way to retaliate when Dumpling quickly chased after Chu Liyue. Saving Master is more important. As for Shangguan Wan, when we meet again, I will definitely return the favor. Dumpling's figure followed closely behind Chu Liyue and disappeared into the dense, faint green light below. Shangguan Wan hugged the tree root tightly, afraid that she would accidentally fall down. Who knows what's down there? At this moment, the air was torn apart. Two silhouettes walked out one after the other. It was Qin Yi and Chang Wanzhou. The black rune on Shangguan Wan's glabella instantly disappeared. The dazed expression on her face gradually faded, and she returned to her previous look filled with anger and resentment. She shuddered. Just now, was I being controlled by that person just now? She's right here, Chang Wanzhou was speaking when he suddenly saw the scene in front of him. Shock flashed across his eyes, and his voice stopped abruptly. Qin Yi reacted faster than him. When he saw the stage that was almost completely collapsing and the strange faint green light in the middle, he immediately realized that something was amiss. He quickened his steps and rushed over. In the end, he saw Shangguan struggling to climb up. Other than her, there was no one else around. Chu Luiwei isn't here. Qin Yi's gaze finally landed on the abyss below. Other than the blinding light, he couldn't see anything. He was just standing at the edge, but he felt like he was about to be swallowed. Where is she? Chang Wanzhou also followed over and stared at Shangguan as he questioned her coldly. Shangguan recognized the two of them and felt a chill in her heart. However, she still forced herself to say, "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. Hurry and save me." Chang Wanzhou's voice was even colder. "I'm asking you, where is she?" Shangguan could only pretend that she didn't know. "What are you talking about? Who is she? I'm the only one here from start to end. Hurry and pull me up." She can't hold on for too long just by relying on her own strength. Someone must bring her out from the outside. Murderous intent appeared on Chang Wanzhou's face. "I can clearly feel Chu Luiyue's aura here. She must have been here before." Looking at Shangguan's haggard appearance, she clearly just went through an intense battle. Clang! Chang Wanzhou suddenly pulled out his sword. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. He held the cloud sky copper sword tightly in his hands. Then, he slashed at the tree root that Shangguan was hugging. Since Shangguan isn't willing to tell the truth, then, I'll just kill her. Digression: it's better to be together at 6 p.m. for the rest of the time. My 5-year-old computer is barely hanging on, and the exhaust fan is so hot that you can fry an egg on it. I brought it to be repaired. Mending and mending for another 3 years, mobile users. Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 746. A piercing sword light flashed across. Shangguan's heart skipped a beat. She watched as the cloud sky copper sword was about to cut that tree root. But just as it was about to touch it, Qin Yi suddenly pressed down on Chang Wanzhou's wrist. His actions were very light, as if he was just touching it lightly. However, Chang Wanzhou's actions instantly stopped. Anger was written all over Chang Wanzhou's beautiful face as he gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands and increased his strength as he tried to resist. However, Qin Yi was simply too strong, and he suppressed Chang Wanzhou completely without batting an eyelid. The moment he put his hand down, Chang Wanzhou couldn't move at all. Realizing that he was indeed not Qin Yi's match, Chang Wanzhou looked up angrily. "I don't believe that Qin Yi can't tell what's going on here. Why did he stop me? It's not enough even if Shangguan dies 10,000 times." Qin Yi's expression had already regained its calmness, and his long and narrow eyes were filled with darkness. "We haven't made things clear yet, so don't jump to conclusions." Then, he looked at Shangguan with a gentle expression. "We'll save you first." Shangguan was elated as she nodded profusely. After Qin Yi said that, he actually waved his sleeves and threw out a rope that wrapped around Shangguan's waist. With a light flick of his wrist, Shangguan was pulled up. After leaving the area enveloped by the dark green light, Shangguan instantly felt as if she had crawled up from hell. She turned around to take a look with lingering fear, and her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. "If I didn't grab that tree root just now and wasn't careful, I would have been the one falling down." Coincidentally, there was another ripple in the air at this moment. A figure walked out from within. Shangguan turned around and was instantly shocked. The person who came was actually Jianghu. "Yuqing!" exclaimed Shangguan as she hurriedly ran over and pounced into his arms. "Yuqing, you are finally here." Jianghu didn't notice it for a moment and was thrown into his arms. He subconsciously put his arms around Shangguan's waist. Shangguan cried in his arms. "I was so scared. I almost died for a long time. Yuqing, did you specially come here to look for me?" Jianghu knew where she was. Since he had appeared now, he must be here for her. Shangguan had been through those things before, so she had accumulated a lot of emotions. At this time, seeing Jianghu, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out. Fear, anxiety. In this short period of time, she had experienced several life and death situations in succession, and her mental state had been extremely tense. Now, he could finally relax a little. The front of Jianghu's shirt was soon soaked by Shangguan's tears. Her arms were tightly wrapped around him, and her body was still trembling slightly. It was obvious that she was extremely scared. Even Jianghu rarely saw her like this. As he softly comforted her, he gently patted her shoulders. "It's fine. Aren't I here now? Don't worry." When Chang Wanzhou saw Jianghu, who suddenly appeared, he pressed his lips together and glanced at Qin. It turns out that he already sensed someone coming. Furthermore, this person is Jianghu. It's not hard to imagine what the outcome would be if Jianghu came and saw me planning to kill Shangguan. But even so, what about Chu Luiyue? Chang Wanzhou looked at the deep abyss in the middle and held the cloud sky copper sword in his hands tightly. Jianghu hugged Shangguan and comforted her, but his gaze was darting around as if he was looking for someone. In between his brows, there was a tinge of undetectable worry. Qin Yi saw it clearly and couldn't help but laugh in his heart as mockery flashed across his eyes. He lightly said, "Jianghu, you came quickly. Eldest young Master Jiang, you came so quickly. We just arrived, yet you followed right behind us." Jianghu's expression froze. "My cultivation level isn't as high as Qin Yi's, and I'm also injured. Logically speaking, it's impossible for me to arrive so quickly. The most important thing is that I didn't come with the two of them, yet I still came here. Without a proper reason, it definitely can't be justified. Not long after you left, I received Wanna's call for help, so I chased her here." Jianghu roughly explained. He didn't intend to tangle with the two of them. No matter whether they believed it or not, they had no right to question him. After all, he and Shangguan were engaged, and they both had respectable statuses. It was very normal for them to have some trump cards. Then he seemed to be reprimanding and heartache as he said, Why did you send the news so late? We almost went crazy looking for you." Shangguan knew what she should do at this time. Besides, she also wanted to hide it a little. She didn't say anything and just hugged Jianghu even tighter as she sobbed. Qin Yi looked at the two of them nonchalantly as if he didn't have any intention of asking. "I see." Jianghu secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he scrutinized the surroundings in detail. He then asked, "What, are you the only one here?" Shangguan laid in his arms, so everyone couldn't see her expression. Shangguan nodded hesitantly, and her voice was muffled. "This means we've already dealt with Chu Luiyue?" Jianghu was stunned. He felt lost and even a little hurt. It was as if someone was holding a needle and stabbing it into his heart, causing a fine and continuous pain. Actually, he had been very conflicted in his heart. On one hand, Chu Luiyue had probably guessed what Shangguan was doing. From all aspects, he had to kill her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. However, on the other hand, he had been very uneasy and worried. Once he thought of the scene of Chu Luiyue being killed by Shangguan, he felt very uncomfortable. Originally, he didn't intend to come. However, by the time he reacted, he was already here. Somehow, it was as if he was being driven by something. Jianghu didn't dare to think too much as if there was a taboo in his heart. Once touched, it would be a complete collapse. Shangguan naturally didn't know anything about this. She just thought that Jianghu really came because he was worried about her. After all, he knew why I came to Dahuang Swamp this time. Thinking of this, Shangguan felt hatred in her heart. I still have a bit of my Yuan meridian to recover. If it wasn't for Chu Luiyue, Jianghu looked down. Judging from this chaotic scene, a huge battle must have happened just now. He furrowed his brows slightly. If Shangguan wanted to kill Chu Luiyue, it should have been very easy. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? Could it be because of that red-tailed phoenix? Since eldest young Master Jiang is here, take the third princess and leave first. Qini spoke. I'll go and see what's down there. Jiang Yuqing followed his line of sight and immediately understood what Qini meant. He actually wants to jump down into that strange abyss that's emitting a dark green glow? What do you want to do? When Shangguan heard this, she instantly looked up and asked agitatedly. Since I killed Chu Luiyue, I definitely won't allow anyone to save him. Jiang Yuqing patted her shoulder and persuaded her gently and patiently. Young Master Qin should have just. Jiang Yuqing's voice stopped abruptly as he pushed Shangguan away as if he had seen a ghost. That face, which used to be considered pretty, was now covered in blood and flesh, looking as terrifying as a malicious ghost. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 747. Shangguan was suddenly pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Her expression changed, and anger rose from her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she happened to meet Jiang Yuqing's eyes. There was also a trace of disgust that was hidden very deeply, but she could still see it. Shangguan was suddenly stunned, and then belatedly remembered that her face had been scratched by the red gold phoenix. Jiang Yuqing was disdaining her face? Shangguan only felt cold all over, and all the blood in her body rushed to her head. An indescribable anger exploded in her heart. Jiang Yuqing saw the change in her eyes and realized that his push just now was inappropriate, so he quickly took a step forward. Your face? How did you get this injury? His words were sincere, and his expression was anxious, as if he was very worried. But the disgust on his face just now had been deeply engraved in Shangguan's mind. There was no woman in the world who didn't care about her face. Especially a princess from the imperial family like Shangguan, who valued her appearance even more. From her hair to her toes, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. From her hairpin to her boots, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. Her status was noble, and she was the center of attention. Her every word and action had to be paid special attention. Not to mention her face? With a disfigured face, who knew what kind of joke she would be if she went out? Shangguan had been on the verge of death before, and it wasn't easy for her to survive. She didn't have time to think about her face at all. Now, Jiang Yuqing's reaction finally reminded her of this matter, and it caused a great shock to her. Shangguan sneered. You didn't ask me if it hurt, but asked me how I got this injury first? Jiang Yuqing secretly said that he had miscalculated. Normally, he definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. But just now, he didn't take any precautions and most of his attention wasn't on Shangguan, so his reaction was a little more direct. As a result, it turned out like this. He knew Shangguan too well. He was afraid that she would hold a grudge against him for a long time. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a headache coming on. He had experienced enough things before, and his body was barely holding on. He had no extra energy to deal with Shangguan. I don't mean anything else. I'm just too worried about you, Shangguan sneered with a mocking expression. Her expression made Jiang Yuqing feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he didn't bother to say the rest of his explanation and comforting words. In the past, Shangguan was very gentle and considerate most of the time. This was also one of the important reasons why he liked her. Although he also knew that Shangguan was not as innocent and harmless as she looked, he did not mind. With such a background, it was normal for her to be scheming and scheming. However, in the past 2 years, she had become sharper and more sensitive. She would often hold onto a small matter and cause a huge commotion. Jiang Yuqing had long been tired, and his patience was wearing thin day by day. He let out a long sigh in his heart, tried his best to suppress his impatience, and persuaded, these are all wounds. These are all superficial wounds. After we go back and apply Bingji ointment on them for a while, they will naturally heal. Previously, Yuji also accidentally hurt her face, but it healed quickly. You can't see anything. Shangguan didn't think much of it and listened to his words as if she was listening to a joke. Of course, she knew that the wounds on her face could be healed. However, Jiang Yuqing's push just now. I will never forget it. Qin Yi was too lazy to care about the two of them and walked straight over. Chang Wanzhou immediately followed. Qin Yi glanced at him. Just stay there. Even I find it dangerous. Isn't Chang Wanzhou courting death by coming over? Chang Wanzhou moved. After hesitating for a while, he still listened to Qin. I know my limits. If Qin Yi went over, he might be able to bring Chu Luiwei back, but if I go, I might just become a burden. Shangguan glanced over from the corner of her eye and saw Qin Yi walking to the edge. She immediately said, "You can't go down." Qin Yi acted like he didn't hear her. Shangguan anxiously said, "It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous down there. You'll just be courting death if you go." Jiang Yuqing also looked over and knitted his brows. It seems like Chu Luiwei fell down there. That aura is very dangerous, and Chu Luiwei should have gone down for a while already. I'm afraid, rumble. A loud boom suddenly came from the abyss. Qin Yi's expression changed. The dark green light glowed brightly. A strong force surged out from within. The surrounding black swamp started to surge crazily. Qin Yi originally wanted to rush in directly, but he was stopped by the crazy force outside. At that moment, the world spun. The few of them disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in the underground of the mystic forest. Bang! The dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. After that sound, it didn't stop. Accompanying it were all sorts of painful cries. This sound made Qin Yi abruptly open his eyes. He suddenly came out of the dark underground, and the surrounding light was so piercing that it hurt his eyes. However, he still bore with the pain and quickly looked around. We're still in the mystic forest. Judging from the messy and broken trees around us, it shouldn't be far from where we were previously. He looked up and indeed saw that mother tree in the distance. Chang Wanzhou wasn't far behind him to the right, and he didn't seem to be severely injured. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan were in front of him. There was a distance between the two of them. When he looked further away, there were people all around them. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and some were disciples from other clans. Qin Yi knitted his brows. It seems like everyone has been chased out. Whose power was that just now? It's actually so strong? Even I can't resist it at all. Big brother. This was Lei Laoxi's voice. Qin Yi turned around and indeed saw Lei Laoxi running over. When he reached Qin Yi, Lei Laoxi anxiously asked, "Big brother her." Qin Yi cut him off. "Hello, third princess." Lei Laoxi hurriedly kept quiet, but his eyes were still filled with anxiousness and worry. Where's Chu Luiwei? I don't know why, but everyone was chased out by a strong force just now. He immediately saw Big Brother here and rushed over excitedly, but he realized that Chu Luiwei wasn't here. We've already found Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing, so why is Her Highness missing? Qin Yi's expression dulled. We haven't found her yet. You haven't found her? How can this be? Lei Laoxi suddenly thought of something, and his voice stopped abruptly as shock flashed across his eyes. He then swiftly scanned his surroundings and carefully scanned everyone's faces. It's still not. Her Highness is actually not here. Unwilling to give up, he lifted his feet and walked to the other side. At this moment, Shangguan's voice was heard. Everyone should have come out by now. Could it be that those who haven't come out have already? Digression. The fifth update was around 6:30 p.m. She silently jotted it down in her notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 748. Shangguan didn't finish her sentence. That was because Lei Laoxi looked over. This time, he didn't scold her with a hoarse voice and only glanced at Shangguan. However, that glance was extremely cold. He was originally very capable, and with this cold and fierce glance, he was even more intimidating. Shangguan subconsciously shuddered, and a tinge of fear grew in her heart. She subconsciously swallowed the rest of her words. However, the hands in her sleeves were already tightly clenched. She looked down and hid the anger in her eyes. When I leave this place, I must find a chance to settle this Lei Laosi. I still remember the scene of Lei Laosi fighting with me previously. I'll settle the old and new grudges together then. Lei Laosi sneered, and his expression looked extremely ferocious and scary. I can see through Sheng Wanwan's thoughts. If I wasn't in a hurry to find Her Highness, I definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Lei Laosi retracted his gaze and walked forward with big strides. This time, Qin Yi didn't stop him. Lei Laosi searched very carefully. Even though he remembered Chu Liuyue's figure, he still seriously looked at every face that he passed by. Some had their backs facing him, and some were lying on the floor. He walked over patiently and searched them one by one. After confirming that it wasn't her, he then continued forward. Sheng Wanwan looked at Lei Laosi's back view and knitted her brows tightly. She turned and saw Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe walked over. Elder Qiushi also came along with her. He quickly caught up to Mu Qinghe and shouted excitedly, "Mu Qinghe, you're the one who gave me the permission to do so." He said excitedly, "Your Highness. We finally found you. You don't know how worried we were for you for such a long time." Mu Qinghe glanced at him and didn't say anything. She then bowed to Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing respectively. "Your Highness, eldest young master." Elder Qiushi wiped his tears with his sleeve. "Your Highness, we are relieved to see that you are safe and sound. We didn't look for you in vain." Sheng Wanwan's attention was finally attracted by his words. She frowned and looked puzzled. "Elder Qiushi, what do you mean by that? You guys have been looking for me all this time?" Elder Qiushi immediately recounted what had happened. Of course, he emphasized his concern for Sheng Wanwan and emphasized that it was under his urging that everyone finally decided to come down to look for her. Because these people were not bound by the roots the second time they came down, Sheng Wanwan was not very clear about this. "So that's how it is. Thank you for your hard work." Sheng Wanwan gritted her teeth and said word by word. If it weren't for these people, she wouldn't have been delayed by Chu Liyue. Elder Qiushi was talking smugly when he suddenly noticed that Sheng Wanwan's mood seemed to be a bit off, so he kept quiet. His gaze quickly swept across Sheng Wanwan's face. I wonder what exactly she went through for her to end up like this. Even though Elder Qiushi's gaze was extremely light and his movements were extremely small, Sheng Wanwan still noticed it. The resentment in her heart deepened, but she couldn't flare up in front of so many people right now. She hurriedly took out a scarf and covered her face. Although her forehead and eyebrows were exposed, and the ghastly wounds could still be seen, it still looked much better than her entire face that was torn apart. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, Lei Laosi and Chu Liyue seemed to have a good relationship. "Do you know what happened?" Mu Qinghe shook her head and said hesitantly, "Lei Laosi and Lei Laosi have been guarding the nine-eyed beasts for a long time. Lei Laosi and the other two have always been in charge of guarding the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Now that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant has broken through and become a red-tailed phoenix, it has made an agreement with Chu Liyue. It's probably related to this matter." It was fine if they didn't mention the red-tailed phoenix, but the moment they mentioned Sheng Wanwan, she was filled with anger. The mythical beast that originally belonged to her was gone, and it even scratched her face. Now that Chu Liyue was dead, that mythical beast definitely wouldn't be able to live either. "This place is very dangerous. We must leave as soon as possible." Jiang Yuqing walked over and said in a low voice. Sheng Wanwan wanted to refute, but she saw Jiang Yuqing looking at a certain spot with a solemn expression. She couldn't help but follow his line of sight, and her breathing suddenly stopped. She saw that the mother tree was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. A gust of wind blew past, and countless leaves turned from green to yellow before falling down. What was even more terrifying was that after those leaves fell to the ground, they actually silently transformed into puddles of blood. Very quickly, a blood-colored puddle was piled up on the ground. And it was still spreading to the surroundings at a terrifying speed. Everywhere it passed by, everything was silently corroded. Such a bloody and bizarre scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. Everyone hurriedly got up and kept retreating. "We can't stay in this place anymore. Let's go. Let's go." The crowd was in chaos. Vaguely, someone seemed to be sucking something. Lu Yu, where are you? Mu Hongyu, Yi Ran, and the rest were looking for Chu Luiyue. There were also many black cavalry soldiers who were looking for Chu Luiyue's whereabouts. Miss Chu, you guys search here, we'll go over there." "Okay." Almost half of the people in the crowd were looking for Chu Luiyue. Sheng Wanwan was stunned by this scene. What was going on? What happened when she wasn't around? Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a cracking sound. She lowered her head and saw that there was a crack on the pure gold armor. Sheng Wanwan widened her eyes in shock. However, soon after, the crack began to spread rapidly. Bang! The pure gold armor dissipated. It turned into powder. At the same time, Chu Luiyue was falling into the abyss. Her surroundings were strange and colorful. Her vision was chaotic, and she couldn't see anything. In the blur, a figure chased after her. It was Dumpling. It flew to Chu Luiyue's body and lifted her up. Dumpling flapped its wings, wanting to leave with Chu Luiyue. However, there seemed to be an invisible suction force below, dragging them all the way down. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions. The lower they went, the more terrifying it was. Countless small wounds instantly appeared on Chu Luiyue's body. However, at this moment, her body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of faint golden light. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 749. The golden light enveloped Chu Luiyue's body, isolating the surrounding terrifying airflow. Chu Luiyue's face was filled with astonishment. This is glazed barrier? She could feel that this was indeed the power of the glazed barrier. But why did it turn from silver to gold? Furthermore, the glazed barrier was usually a spherical barrier. Chu Luiyue had never seen a barrier that formed a layer of protection. Rather than calling it a barrier, it was better to call it armor. It was an armor. With such a tight fit, other than the fact that it wasn't a real object, it wasn't much different from an armor. Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, she saw the golden light on her arms suddenly condense. At first, she didn't notice it, but when she saw the strange patterns on it, she finally realized that something was wrong. Why did these patterns look so familiar? Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while, then looked at her body. Indeed, she found that the golden light on other parts of her body was also condensing. From top to bottom. At her chest, a silver light suddenly flashed. Chu Luiyue lowered her head to take a look, and her eyelids twitched violently. Because in front of her chest, there was actually a heart protection mirror. Chu Luiyue blinked her eyes, and a trace of disbelief surged in her heart. This is as if to confirm her guess. The surrounding golden light condensed even faster. Not long after, it completely formed the appearance of an armor. This armor wasn't brand new, and there were many marks on it, as if it had experienced many intense battles. The faint golden color, warm and simple, thick and heavy. It perfectly fit Chu Luiyue's body, as if it was specially made for her, outlining the perfect lines of her body. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a long time. Looking at the armor that suddenly appeared on her body, she held her breath. There seemed to be blood flowing through her eardrums, and it was beating violently like her heart. Chu Luiyue's breathing became hurried, and her entire body seemed to be ignited. Her cheeks were boiling, but her eyes were as bright as the most resplendent night sky. Pure gold sacred armor. This was really the pure gold sacred armor. Originally, she thought that it had been taken away by Sheng Wanwan, but she didn't expect it to appear here, on her body. Stars flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Luiyue looked up. Countless golden streams of light converged, and finally condensed into a helmet. It was the helmet of the pure gold sacred armor. Chu Luiyue's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She slowly stretched her hand, and held the helmet in her hand. It was cool to the touch, but it also had a trace of boiling heat. An extremely bright light from the top of the helmet's helmet. Immediately, with the light with the pure gold sacred armor's body armor, the armor pure gold sacred armor, instantly, like the wind with the wind, everything it was as if a layer of dust had finally been wiped off, revealing its original color and luster. The pure armor recognize its Chu Luiwen never expected the pure gold armor to return to her side in such a manner. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why the pure gold sacred armor didn't recognize Shangguan 1 as its new owner was most likely because her soul still existed. How did it come about? Chu Luiwei recalled the situation just now and was suddenly stunned. Could it be? Is this really related to the glazed barrier? At the thought of this, she tried to summon the glazed barrier. The pure gold sacred armor was overflowing with light and colors, and it gradually became transparent. It was like a layer of transparent and colorless soft armor that perfectly covered Chu Liyue's body. Only when one looked carefully could one see the faint engravings on it. This was indeed the glazed barrier. But this was also the pure gold sacred armor. Seemed like after encountering the pure gold sacred armor, the glazed barrier had changed. These two things had invisibly merged into one, and in the end, it appeared before her eyes in this way. Chu Liyue's heart trembled. A scene suddenly appeared in her mind. The day before she left country Yao Chen's imperial capital, she accompanied Rong Xiu to play chess and informed him that she was about to leave and head to the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu said that the glazed barrier he gave her previously was damaged, so he would give her a new one. At that time, Chu Luiwei didn't pay much attention to it, because the second glazed barrier was exactly the same as the first one. From the outside, there was no difference at all. It wasn't until she arrived at Xiling, participated in the Wanzheng competition, and entered the Tianling God realm that she finally realized that this glazed barrier seemed to be a little different. Its defensive power was extraordinary. At that time, although Chu Luiwei was curious, she didn't think too much about it because the situation was urgent. Later on, he gradually forgot about this matter. If the glazed barrier hadn't taken the initiative to appear and protect her this time, she might not have remembered the existence of this little thing. Now that she thought about it, she had a clue. What kind of Yuan instrument could easily block the sword aura of the long Yuan sword? Although the glazed barrier was divided into several grades, this kind of power was simply too shocking. Even the best glazed barrier she had seen in her previous life might not be able to do this. Rong Xiu, Chu Luiwei mumbled softly with a complicated expression. A bold thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Rong Xiu, does he know something? Thousands of miles away. In the room, two people sat opposite each other. Pa 36 respected Elder Ming placed his last piece. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces went through an intense battle before the victor was finally decided. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up. I've finally won against you, Your Highness. Rong Xiu put the chess piece back into the chess jar and looked up with a faint smile. Respected Elder's power is superb. I admit defeat. His words were said casually, as if he had already expected this outcome. 36 respected Elder Ming was originally stroking his beard with a smile. When he saw Rong Xiu's expression, his heart skipped a beat. He accidentally pulled out 3 strands of his silver-white beard. Did Your Highness purposely let me win? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. No, I didn't. I thought too much and lost this round. Don't give me that. Do you think I can't tell whether you went easy on me or not? 36 respected Elder Ming glared at him angrily. When he played chess with Rong Xiu, he had almost never won. After studying for so long, he did not expect it to end up like this. His joyful mood was instantly reduced. However, after thinking about it, this outcome was normal. 36 respected Elder Ming was relieved. You started learning chess at the age of 5. When you were 6, you had few opponents. After you were 7, even I found it hard to win against you. After losing for so many years, do you think I'm a sore loser? I'm already used to it, okay? At the start, Rong Xiu went easy on him very obviously. Later on, he gradually hit it very well. If your highness wants to, you can definitely play all the chess players in the world in your hands. 36 respected Elder Ming let out a long sigh. Rong Xiu suddenly chuckled. His thin lips curled up slightly as he leaned against the back of the chair and said lazily, "Not necessarily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.